Hello folks, I am doing a time lapse this morning of the sun. I hope to be able to get 1, 2 or more hours of images of the sun. I've just uploaded or I've just started the process, and I will be using, let me find it, I'll be using this bottom telescope, which is the Astrotech 65 EDQ, and attached to that is a Quark, Quark chromosphere. That's made by Daystar, and then I have a tilt adapter to help to minimize the Newton rings, which are artifacts banding that messes up the image. Uh, they can be flattened out, but it's much easier just to use this very low cost solution. And then I have an ASI 174 monochrome camera that will be doing all the heavy lifting. The mount's an Atlas, is a Celestron AVX mount, and the supply of power and data is controlled by the blue box underneath the telescope. That's called the Pegasus Ultimate Power Box version 2. I only have 2 cables coming out of my telescope to the computer. One's a data, and then the other is a power, and actually it's to the power supply, not to the computer. But I have cables going to the both telescopes to connect the cameras, and those plug into the power box. And then I have to power the Quark chromospheres that control the bandwidth of the hydrogen alpha filtering system, which is the Quark chromospheres. The telescope on top, I may do some imaging with that as well. Just depends. But the telescope at the top is a Solar Scout, and that's another Daystar product. I haven't gotten good at imaging with that yet. One of the reasons is that it has a helica focuser, and I have 76-year-old eyes, and when I go outside, even with glasses, and covering up the computer with a cover so that I can see it, it's just really hard for me to get a real good focus. But on the Astrotech, the bottom kit, you see that green adapter that plugs into the telescope that's attached to the telescope. That's a moonlight focuser, and it allows me to stay inside and connect to the outside laptop via Wi-Fi, which is what I'm doing now. And then I can control the focuser, I can control the mount, I can control the cameras. Everything that is plugged into that ultimate power box that ultimately is plugged into the computer, I have control over, which makes it really good. So with that being said, let's go now to our outside sun view of the sun. I'm using SharpCap as my acquisition software. So bear with me a minute. There are windows I need to close you can't see that have to do with the streaming software that I use. My mouse is not going very fast today. I hope that means my Wi-Fi connection is working okay. Well, we need to get rid of At the top, what you're seeing is a new feature by SharpCap that it is to help guide the telescope, similar to PhD2, which is the guiding software I use when I image at night. This new feature for SharpCap I've not yet gotten to work really well, and part of the reason is that we're not getting really good views of the sun. It's not a real sharp looking picture, and I've been all over the place with focusing, trying to get it more focused, sharper looking, but the seeing conditions are not going to make that possible. We have a great sky today. It's without a cloud in it right now, but that doesn't necessarily mean the seeing condition, which are the thermo issues between my telescope and the sun, uh, created by everything from moisture to all the other chemistry that's in the sky. And in fact, if you pay attention to the sun, you can see that at times it looks like it's sharper than at other times. Well, I'm not touching the focuser, and that is really the evidence of the seeing conditions that are fluctuating. It happens, of course, at night, and and yet you have more contrast at night on your targets, and guiding with products or software like PhD2 is better. So anyway, um, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and shut this off. I don't really see it helping me, and I'm gonna reset my reticle uh, because I use that to as a point of identifying um, my target, and I'm going to move my sunspot, which is the feature that I want to make sure that I have positioned over the crosshairs of the reticle, and and in order to do that, I'm going to need to move my. Hang on, just 1 minute. I'm going to need to move the sun over just a little bit by controlling my um, telescope. This is on the far right here. You can see where I'm moving the mouse around. I can control the direction. If I key on north, I believe that'll move the sunspot towards the crosshairs. So let's see if I'm right. I'm pressing on that ever so hesitantly, because once it gets started, it's like running a battleship. It's hard to get it started because of backlash, and it's hard to stop it sometimes. It just continues to go. So we're getting close, and then I want to bring it down, which I believe is the right arrow, and it's kind of hitting it red, which is the west area and declination. Okay, so what I want to first do is I want to make sure that I have um, my external hard drive set up, because I'm going to be saving a lot of there's an external SSD hard drive, and I'm going to make a new folder. It's going to be 7.3.21 solar, and hit on, make sure you click on apply, and then I'm going to pick under quick capture. I'm going to use quick capture for most of the day. I'm going to use 1,000 frames, so it's right now on 200 frames. I'm going to reposition this just again a little bit. I'm going to have to move the mount north just a tad to get it back in the center, and it went too far, so I got to come back south. You can see that controlling this mount as a result of backlash and gear slop, all backlash is the reluctance of the gears to engage because there's slop in the gears. As precision as they are, they're still uh, not perfect by a large measure. So let's go down there and take 1,000 frames. We are currently taking frames at the rate of 65 per second. If you look at the bottom here, 65 frames per second, we've done 800 frames. We now have 1,000 frames. So it didn't take long, and it is completed. I'm going to wait a few seconds, and I'm going to take another 1,000. I'm going to make sure it's on 1,000. Nope, still on 200. Let's try it again. Normally I wait about 10 seconds between frames. Sometimes it's longer because I have to recenter. In fact, more times than not, I have to recenter the sun into the reticle. Okay, that's been taken and it's complete. And let's take another one. I'm going to go ahead now. I've kind of practiced with these. I'm going to go ahead now and take and label this sun spot. And from now on, let's move this up some, which is east. And we're going to have to move it over a little bit, which is north. This is the one that gets crazy. It has the most slop in the gears. You got to pulse it and then wait and see if it moves, because it catches up with you after you've already gone too far. East and west is a lot more responsive. And we're now moving north. Okay, just hope we didn't go too far. Let's take another 1,000 while we're there. And you can see that it's a bit of a challenge to recenter after every 1,000 frames. We're at 600. When I get finished and I start processing, I will not keep all 1,000 frames. Remember, we talked about how the sun kind of goes in and out of focus. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to program the processing software to only keep the best 200 frames out of 1,000. And hopefully I'll get 200 fairly sharp looking images. All right, let's move it north just a tad bit again. We're drifting. Okay, let's knock off another 1,000. This should go at 1,000 now. We're at 600. SharpCap does have focusing software that you can give a go to. I've not yet found that it really helps that much. Contrast edge detection is the best of the programs that I've found for using your focusing. And so far it hasn't rendered, it's just not working at all. And I don't really want to fool with it, so let's close it out. I'm just curious. I want to see if the contrast brightness range is working. It's not working either. That's interesting. Um, That's a glitch in the software which is recently updated. It may have happened before in other versions that I updated. I don't use it. I really try to just go by what I'm seeing on the screen. I'm going to have to nudge the mount over a little more, moving the sun spot closer to the reticle. Oh, I think it's going to go too far. And I need to move the sun down just a tad, which is west. There we go. Now let's knock off another 1,000, and we're capturing 65 frames a second. We just hit 1,000. I want to bring up my focuser, my electronic focuser, and you can see the step size right now, or the step count. I'm 1,106. I'm 605 steps from being racked all the way in. So I'm racked out 11,605 steps. Get that, Ed. And I'm going to do a little playing around here and see if I can improve the focus. I'm going to go out 10 steps and give it a second. I'm going to go out another 10 steps. Actually, I think it's helped. And give it a second. I know it has. Also, I have a sneaky suspicion. I was looking at images from NASA of the sun earlier this morning, and I saw some prominences. I'm going to take the exposure, and I'm going to run it up really high. There you go. And there are some proms that are coming off of the surface of the sun. These are jetting up thousands of miles. Some of these go up to 300,000 miles. Consider the fact that you can fit 1 million Earth-sized planets inside the sun. You could stack 4 or 5 or 6 Earths on top of each other in this, stay within this sunspot. These are just explosions, not sunspot in this prominence. These are just explosions off the surface, that solar flares that are shooting out. Really just nuclear explosions. And then the gravity of the sun will pull all of this back. A lot of the times you'll see arcing. This is starting to arc, where it shoots up, drifts, and then the gravity pulls it back and it loops. You'll see looping along the sun's rim more often than not. Sometimes it's a good idea to try to focus on the clarity and the prominence. And I'm going to try doing that and see if I can get a little more detail in the prominence by playing with this. Let's go back 10 steps. It actually looks a little better. Let's go in 1 step, 2. As you can see, it's just let's go back out those. Let's go out another 10 steps. Oh, that didn't help at all. Let's go back the 10 steps we just lost. Yep. Let's go the other way then. 1 step at a time. Actually, that's looking much more detailed. Let's go back to our surface, and let's go down to about 13 or 14. Let's go up to 17 milliseconds. I'm watching this histogram. Um, right now, the histogram is staying well within this box. This is the layers, levels of luminosity as graphically illustrated by this graph. This is the dark part, which is over here, that you're seeing on the far left, and then the there is no data on the far right. But if you go too far, I'll raise the exposure. You'll see that the histogram goes off. That's when I've lost data. Like, you'll see there is nothing in the way of detail over here because I've clipped that side of the sun. So I'm going to bring this back to about, I like to keep the histogram about 70%. That gives me plenty of luminosity to work with in post-processing. Okay, well, our sun has drifted again, and so I need to move it north, which is going to bring it back towards the reticle. I keep the reticle fixed in the center. That way I can always come back to that reference. And I'm going to need to hit west to move the sun down. And I guess I'm going to have to go south now to come back. I went too far in north. And then we're going to knock off another. I've waited a long time between these two time lapse shots, which is, I hope doesn't create an issue for my. Let's go up a little bit. Let's try going over a little more with south. And let's go up just a tad more. Let's knock off another 1,000. Sun's really had some very photographable. I can't. It's easy to photograph sunspots on the sun lately. Photographical, yeah, photographical. I don't know why that was a difficult thing, but at any rate, it's got some photographical parts that sometimes it's just nothing but plain Jane with nothing going on here. Now, I'll take another. As I accumulate these frames, I'll put them together. I'll process each frame of 1,000. I'll reduce that to the best 200. I'll put that into a TIFF image. Hopefully I'll have about 300, maybe 400 individual images. I'll process each one of them separately, and I'll put them in a GIF video so it's easy to upload and see what's going on. And usually what you see is stuff going in and out of the sunspot and considerable movement that you really can't see otherwise. But over a period of time, it becomes a lot more evident. We're going to have to move north a little bit to, move south a little bit to bring the sun back, and then go up east. Oh, that was north. Get dyslexic. And let's move up east a tad. All right, let's knock off another 1,000. And we've moved again, so we're going to have to go east. Come up a little bit. And let's move it over. Oh, darn it. Oh, it's just aggravating. Okay, let's knock one off right there. We got her centered. Hopefully, we'll stay there a while. We got a much nicer day, and we're in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and we've had really just a couple of weeks of clouds. This is the time of year where we have our afternoon threats of thunderstorms, which is okay. It's part of living in the South. A lot of humidity, but you're reluctant to set up an image at night because, particularly if you put your gear up and take it down every night. I don't do that. I'm permanent, but for those who have to put their gear up and take it down, which takes some time, it's scary to set up at night because if you're going to image all night, you never know if you're going to have a thunderstorm come up unexpectedly and soak your equipment, which can ruin it. All right, we're going to do a little shifting of the sun again because it needs to move north a tad, but a tad only. And then I need to move south a little bit. Actually, I'm going to leave it there. That's knock off another 1,000. Now, I could, from experience, I know that I don't really have to recenter as often as I'm recentering because I use a stacking software that will do that for me. But the closer I can get it, easier it is for the stacking software, and less cropping will be done by the software. Um, and I would, a bird just flew by or a plane, I saw it at the bottom, but it wasn't in the frame. So I'm going to recenter again, which is to bring it down just a little bit, which is over here on the west side. Now, it doesn't take much to move the mount because we're on a target, a spot on the sun, 93 million miles away. So it doesn't take much. It's the reason why it's so hard to center because this mount is just moving ever so slightly, and it doesn't take much to put us in a overshoot mode. Okay, we're knocking off another one. Let's wait a few seconds and take another one. Okay, here we go. We're at 500 frames, going for 1,000. The faster your exposure, the more frames per second. And so for that reason, one of the things that I'll do is I'll play the game of gain and exposure. If you raise your gain, you create noise on your image. But let's say you raise it to 140, you can lower your exposure to, let me get my histogram, to about 70. You can lower your exposure to 8 seconds, and that allows you to take 112, which is almost twice as many. So let's be twice as fast. That is helpful when you have as much drift as I'm having between frames because it knocks them off faster before it can drift out of the picture. So we're going to have to move north again. That's the up arrow, I believe, to get back in the center of the crosshairs. And we're going to have to move down, which is the west area. I overshot north again and overshot west. Okay, we're pretty good on west and east. Now let's see if we can't uh, get back in the center with our south. Uh, we're going to go east again. Or yeah, we're going to go east again because. All right, we're back. Let's take another 1,000, and we're already done at 1,000 at 112 frames, 125, 120 frames per second. Let's take another. Now, um, the mount I'm using is a Celestron AVX mount, and it's on a tripod. I leave it up all the time because I use Telegizmo covers, which protect the gear incredibly. I can't say enough good things about them. But I have two permanent pier telescopes on Atlas Pro mounts. If I would take the telescope off of one of those Atlas Pros and swap it with my solar scope, uh, that uh, that's already polar aligned, and I probably could get by without making, uh, but well, may not have to make any changes, and it would stay pretty much on target. It's just an aggravation, and I don't mind doing it. Uh, or I could polar align the mount, which at night, and I'd have to swap telescopes or swap opticals in order to polar align it. With PoleMaster, I probably would. Now I wouldn't have to with PoleMaster. I doesn't use a telescope. At any rate, I just talked myself into doing that tonight. Tonight I will polar align this scope, and we're using PoleMaster. Haven't used it in so long I forgot how it worked. All right, we're going to have to go up, which is east, and we're going to have to go over, which is north. Because I talked myself out of, nah, I went too far. And the reason why when you first hit these arrows, that it doesn't move is that it's taking up the slack, and that's the backlash issue. These are not high end mounts. Um, they're consumer mounts. They're for amateur astronomers. They do a nice job, but they're certainly far from the precision of the astrophysics mounts and the paramount mounts. But you're talking about thousands and thousands of dollars in expense that uh, this hobby can bring a lot of reward spending a fraction. People will look at what I've got in the backyard and say, my gosh, how much is all that cost? You'd be surprised how little it does cost. It isn't, if you played golf, you'd spend more. If you went boating, you'd spend a whole lot more. If you buy the boat, I mean, a whole lot more. So, whatever your hobby is, it seems to cost. But I would think this would probably be the least expensive hobby a human being could have. And might be wrong, but checkers and chess and marbles would probably, no question. But if you've got a hunting, fishing, hobby, golf, uh, just don't throw in shopping, then this is pretty much a no-brainer expense-wise. Telescopes, nice telescopes, Newtonians, they're all less than lenses for cameras. Unless you get into the high end, and you don't have to do that to get good images. And the mounts are less than good cameras, these DSLRs. So there you go. Now I did lay a platform, pour concrete, and bury and bolt in piers, but you know that really wasn't all that much either. So we're going to shift this over a little bit. We're viewing the live. We have a live view of the sun again, and enjoying clear skies. We're going to have to go over north and try to center again on the crosshairs and knock off some more. Come on over. There we go. And let's knock off another 1,000 at 112 frames per second. Knock off another one. If I were using a mount that had been polar lined where the drift was minimized, that tracking software might help. But my drift is so much that the tracking software is having a hard time to stay with it. But you can pick uh, options for taking pictures where you could say, I want to take, let's say you wanted to take 300 frames and you wanted the frames to be 1,000 frames long and you wanted to wait 10 seconds between frames. And if you click start, then it's going to start one right after another until it has 300 1,000 frames at 10-second intervals, which is pretty cool, but only if your image stays on target. So I just do it manually. In particular, I don't do many time lapses, and so it doesn't really matter. It's only when you're doing a time lapse that you have to really pay attention to these nudging of the mount issues that I deal with. Let's go over just a tad. At north, and let's go down a little tad west. Now we gotta go east. East is down. Move the sun down. No, it was right the first time. Sure is going in and out of focus, which is seen. All right, take another 1,000 frames. I'm going to do two more things and then sign off, because I'll come back to this and do some more. But I take flat frames, and flat frames are going to remove the dust that's collected on my optical train. This thing right here isn't part of the sun. It's dirt on either the camera sensor or the quark chromosphere. I doubt it's dirt on the telescope, because those elements are on the far end of the telescope and they usually don't play a role. You like to keep them reasonably clean, but I don't touch that glass. It's so fragile. I don't touch any other. I use blowers to clean them. But this is a smudge. That's a smudge. Down here's another smudge. You can see they don't move when the sun moves, and that's because they're permanent. So I want to remove them when I process. And one way to do that is by taking flat frames. So in order to take flat frames, I'm going to raise the speed of the mount to 16 times sidereal, and I'm going to move the mount, or move the sun over, and I'm going to go to the center of the sun. Now I need to move it up, which is going to be east, I think. Nope. And I really want to fill in with nothing but white. Try to get the spot out of there, and then I want to move over a little more, other way. All right, then I want to lower. This is too bright down here in the corner, which is fine, but I'm looking at my histogram. I want to tell 5 of these. I want to lower the, go back to 4x for right now, the histogram just a tad by changing my exposure just a tad. About there. All right, I picked up some black at the top, so I want to move the sun down a little bit like that. All right, now I'm going to defocus, and I'll get rid of everything but the smudges. So I'm going to go in or out 1,000 frames, 1,000 steps, and then I'm going to go up to capture. Oh, I'm going to change the name to master flat, and then I'm going to go up to quick capture, and I'm going to take 500 frames for this. Now what you're seeing is the dirt because I've defocused the sun, and this is what the flat will subtract from my regular image. So those have been taken. I'm going to take another 500 frame flat frame, and I'm done. And I want to go back to sun surface, no, sunspot, and I'm going to bring up my focuser. I'm going to come back 1,000 frames, 1,000, I don't know where I get frames, come back 1,000 steps and bring us back to where we were. And then I want to move back to my target. I want to recenter the reticle. So no reticle, add crosshairs. Okay, and then we need to move the mount north. Let's go back to 16 times sidereal. No, we need to move this more south. You'd think I'd get the hang of this, and then we got to go the other way. I got our flat frames taken. Now we're going to go back here and see if we can't move back over. I might have to change the speed because we're going to go too fast. And now we need to go down, which would be west. And let's move. Oh, we went too far. Let's come back east. Again, it's like running a battleship. You can't hardly turn them. And now we need to move the sun to the right spot, so that's south. I think I'm right. Yeah. There, and bring it up another tad, which is east. All right, let's go back and knock off 1,000 frames, which resets this to 1,000. I said I wanted to do 2 things. The one thing I wanted to do was the flats. The second thing is I want to also take a couple of 500 frame pictures of the prominence. And I want to get a good view of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise the exposure time to about, oh, let's go to 20 frames per second, and let's raise the gain up to go to 200. And now let's raise the exposure up a little more. And we're at 35 frames per second. Let's play around with focus just a minute. Although that's looking pretty focused. Let's go ahead and knock off 500 frames. Let's call this prom. I don't know where the eye's coming from. I guess I'm hitting it. Huh. U-N-P-R-O-M. Alright. Alright, we're going to go to quick capture and we're going to do, we don't need 1,000 frames, but we're going to do probably 5. And the reason why I'm doing multiples of this is I would like to get, that went pretty quick. I think I'm going to, we're at 34 frames. I think I'm going to do 1,000 frame. And I'll solve for the best 100 and probably get some detail. Now you can see some of the arcing. This is probably where the emission of the prominence is happening, and then gravity is bringing it back over here. It's possible that it's just 2 emissions, but the arcing that you see on the surface of the sun is pretty cool. Okay, let's take another 1,000 frames. What I will do is I will take one of my surface images, I'll process it, and then I'll process the prominence, and then I'll layer one on top of the other, and you'll see the surface and the prominence, something that the quark chromosphere can't do in one image. And it can't do it because it just can't expose for the sun's surface, and then also this prominence, which requires raising the exposures considerably. Can't do it in one frame. Now they do have another adapter similar to the quark chromosphere that does nothing but prominences. It doesn't do a very good job of the surface. In fact, it doesn't image the surface at all very well, but it does the prominence in much better detail. Let's take another 1,000 frames. I'll get 2 more, and then I'm going to go back to my time lapse. These long delays in my time lapse won't be evident to people watching the gift, but I'll know when it happens. I think I'll know when it happens, just from history. Okay, we've got the prominence. We're going to now go back to sunspot. There's that eye again. And we're going to move this back to 145. I'm just going to type it in. And we're going to move this back to, I think, 5. No, we're going to bring it up slightly. Again, I'm watching my histogram. When you're doing these, you have to make sure that you've got the luminosity the same throughout your entire set of time lapses. Otherwise, you'll see bright, dark, fluctuations in the luminosity that really ruin the time lapse. Afraid I probably have already caused that to happen. Okay, we've had drift during that little diversion to the prominence. So let's bring the sun back up, east and north, and let's bring her over. I'm going to take another 1,000 frame image and say good morning to everybody, And I hope you have a great 4th of July. I hope your dogs don't suffer from firecrackers like our dogs do. They both uh, go nuts, but our Annie gets sick, and it actually makes her sick. She has bathroom issues for a week afterwards. Uh, but they both just, I don't know what, I don't know why. I don't know, I don't understand her. I can't explain it. And I hate for people to not have their fun, but it sure does mess with our doggies. Okay, we've got to go back over. My wife and I were talking about, my wife Mimi and I were talking about taking the dogs in the car for a ride. But golly, tomorrow night's going to be a great night for imaging, and that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm not a firecracker guy. All right, I'm going to take another 1,000 frames, and as that is happening, I'm going to say goodbye to you guys, and I hope you have again a great 4th of July. Thanks for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube and you want to consider subscribing, uh, I'd like to have you do that and like the video. And if you have some suggestions on how I can improve anything that I'm doing, I'm all I'd like to hear them. And so I thank you. And again, have a great 4th.